Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Yeah.
What's going on, everybody?
Welcome to yet another episode of Anatomy of a Movie. I know you cinephiles have been waiting for this one for a while now. This is the show where we deep dive into the latest movies and we do an in-depth analysis from cast, story, production, trivia. We cover it all with diverse perspectives, and I'm so excited because today we are covering The Invisible Man, an incredible film, you guys. And I'm your host, Mina Naidine, super happy to be back, and this is the first time that I will be covering Anatomy of a Movie with Vito Scutti.
Hello, everybody. I'm so glad to be here. I am a frequent producer on this show, and now I'm finally here.
Yes, he tends to be behind the scenes, you guys, and I've worked with him very, very often. I love working with Vito.
Thank you.
Of course, and what you may not know about Vito is that he's actually a film school graduate. He's an editor, he's a producer, he went to school for directing. He really has an eye for film, and I think he's going to bring an amazing perspective to this show, because he always does in our conversations about movies behind the scenes.
Thank you very much, Mina. Of course, I'm so glad to be on here with you, who has been with Anatomy for so very long. It's really good to be on here with such a vet that will bring so much respect to a movie that, to be completely honest, I loved.
I loved it too, and I was not expecting to love it, but what was, The Invisible Man about for our viewers?
Here's our log line. When a narcissist is given an inch, he takes a mile, as we follow Cecilia Cass, who is Elizabeth Moss, who was thrown into a situation she could have never expected. That's The Invisible Man. It's a horror film. It's by Blumhouse. It's very good.
That was the best movie announcer voice I've ever heard.
Thank you so much.
Trailer reviews.
Thank you.
In a world.
In a world.
Anyways, you guys, this is going to be a spoiler-filled review, so if you have not yet seen The Invisible Man, we do not want to ruin it for you. Make sure to watch it. It's very, very intense, so if you can't handle horror, go with a friend.
Please go with a friend.
Literally, I had to go with a friend, and she fell asleep during it, but still, it was nice to have someone there with me.
I went with 5 friends. And we were all very different perspectives, but Ryan in the booth actually was with me, and we were both shaking.
I was one of those friends. And Ryan in the booth here, I was one of those friends, and I was under my chair at one point. I was being made fun of when we left the theater. It was a little embarrassing, but I had a great time.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much.
I was literally shaking. I mean, I went into this thinking, okay, there's going to be jump scares, whatever. From the very beginning of the movie, I was like, I need to walk out. I can't do this. This is too much. It's too tense. But what were your overall thoughts of this film?
So I went into it kind of with high hopes. I normally go into movies with optimism. I like to give movies, especially movies that just pique my interest, with advertising the benefit of the doubt. I kind of actually got exactly what I was hoping for. I expected it to be more of a tense movie rather than a horror movie, because Blumhouse doesn't really go for cheap scares most of the time, from what I've seen of theirs, which admittedly isn't a lot, but that is going to change very soon. And I came out of it really understanding that it was such an introspective film. It was very much advocating for a cause that, I'm glad that it advocated for what it did, being that domestic abuse is on several folds. It's not just physical, it is emotional. Narcissism is very potent and is very effective, and the story was very effective to me. It was very hard to watch, but I could not stop watching. I was on the edge of my seat the entire 2 hours that it was going on, and I really just think it was so well crafted. What about you? What did you think of it immediately coming out?
I loved it. I really, really was not expecting to love it. First of all, I need to preface this with I am not a horror person. I do not do horror in any capacity. But the weird thing is that I do psychological thrillers. I love Gone Girl. I loved Us. I loved Get Out. If it's done in a creative way and if there is a psychological component to it, I am all for it, because I love the concept of someone getting into another person's psyche. because I'm a sociopath. That's why. But,
that's a little harsh.
You know, I really did enjoy this film. I was a little triggered by it because I had a lot of empathy for Cecilia.
Yeah,
just
me
like
as well.
You know what you were saying. Like, I mean, jokes aside, you know, domestic violence is a very serious issue, and I think what this movie did so brilliantly well is that it showed that domestic violence happens at a psychological level. It's not just beating someone. Yeah. It's literally isolating them from everyone who's close to them. And there was a huge component of gaslighting where she was made to think that she was crazy. And even towards the end of the film, we see a lot of things going on where it's a little questionable, where we, the audience, you know, I was talking to my friend, she's like, I was starting to believe him. I'm like, come on. Like, come on. But that's a real thing. That's a real thing.
Absolutely. And the writing, I think, kind of tells to that. The story of this definitely frames it in a light where the audience is supposed to be kind of back and forth on whether Elizabeth Moss is actually seeing things, whether she's actually, but to an extent, I kind of like, as an audience member, wanted to believe her the entire time. I think they did a really good job at kind of taking us in the directions that they needed to, better than a lot of films that I've seen that have tried to do this. I also just wanted to mention on the fact that you are not into horror and got into it through psychological thrillers. I'm actually also generally not a horror fan, but I started upon watching around my senior year of college, watching fantasy films that derived into the genre of horror or thriller with The Witch. That was back in 2000. I want to say that's 2017, 2018, and then kind of dove headfirst into a lot of them because I believe that horror is now definitely more along the lines of where fantasy movies are lying.
Right.
And I think this movie especially did that so well, where they took a fantastical concept, threw it into a movie that is more about the underlying message of, like, this is what domestic violence looks like, this is how it can affect somebody, but, like, just made it on that line of unbelievable for the suit and everything to make people more invested into it. That's why I ultimately wanted to see this, because I really enjoy seeing concepts that are very fantastical thrown into like a shorter form, a very like intense story. I think it's a really good direction that Blumhouse is taking a lot of their films.
I think you encapsulated that perfectly, because now that I'm thinking about it, even when it comes to Guillermo del Toro, and you know, my favorite movie is Pan's Labyrinth, El Laberinto del Fauno.
Good taste.
And he does that so well, just like incorporating fantastical elements, but there is still a believability to what is going on. And I loved how this movie was like, is Cecilia crazy? Isn't she crazy? But we're seeing things, but we don't know if the things that we're seeing is reality or if it's her version of reality. So there was a lot of that going on as well. And I mean, I just think from beginning to end, this was done so well. I mean, I still keep going back to the very first scene because I feel like that was the strongest scene in the entire movie. Literally.
So good.
It was amazing.
Just, they didn't have to say a word about the situation. I immediately, when she, even from Elizabeth Moss's first movement of just taking his hand off of her, carefully, as though if she woke him up, a bomb would go off.
Right.
Can I just take a quick second to compliment Elizabeth Moss directly? Fantastic job. We'll go into it a little bit more, but your part in this movie was so incredibly important, and you handled it expertly. I don't think she made the movie for me. A lot of the performances were very good, but completely honestly, if Elizabeth Moss did not put in as much as she did into this role, I don't think it would have been as believable, as successful, anything along those lines.
I definitely feel like she carried the entire film. Not to say that the writing wasn't good. I mean, the writing was good. I mean, Leigh Whannell was the director and the writer, so he did the screenplay, the screen story. He's known for the horror genre.
Yeah, for Saw, for all of the Saws, he's the director and writer. Yeah, Upgrade. He also did Insidious. I did not watch Insidious because I am a coward, but I've heard Insidious is very good. They're mixed reviews sometimes, but I've heard Insidious as a horror film is very good, definitely.
Right.
But his writing with Saw, with that genre specifically, obviously he's very honed. And I think he's gotten to the point, I'm kind of glad to see him move away from the kind of kinchy horror and move into something like Blumhouse Productions, where he can kind of hone his craft a little better.
Right.
Bring forth psychological horrors that aren't necessarily a gore fest. That was another thing. Well, we'll touch on that. Yeah, there was a few moments in this that I was like, that's a little much for the violence, but coming from the writer of Saw, I guess he toned it down a lot.
It was the perfect balance, though, of not just, like, plain out gore, because in the beginning you don't see the gore. It's all, like, build up. It's anticipation. It's her running away.
Yeah.
And the scene where my heart just, like, dropped was when she accidentally knocks over the dog food. And it makes,
she
like,
hits
this insane amount of noise in the middle of the night. I'm like, she's done. Something's going to happen. He's going to, like, hit her or do something. And I was so scared. And then she just, like, jumps out. Her sister comes to the rescue, and then he
comes out of nowhere.
Crazy ex punches through the car, breaking the window. How is that not a clue to her sister? This guy is crazy. At that point, I would never question Elizabeth Moss's character ever again. I would never question Cecilia. I'd be like, he's crazy. What is going on?
Yeah.
How could he just punch with brute force through the window? What is going on?
But this is where I want to compliment the writing again, because I really do think that they set up the way for him being Oliver Jackson, who plays Cohen in this. Adrian
Griffith.
Yeah, Adrian Griffith, that's his character name. I think the way that the writing went into him subverting everything that she knew was real and everything that everybody else in the situation knew was real, the execution of that was perfect, because I believed nothing for half of the movie. I wanted to believe Elizabeth Moss. I wanted to believe Cecilia. But there were just some instances where she was saying that, like, he's in the room, he wasn't in the room. Or, like, he was in the room, I'm not sure. But to subvert all of the expectations of everybody around her, including James and Sydney Lanier, her friends, everything like that.
Yeah.
It paid off so well. It felt so satisfyingly dreadful.
Right.
With the email that is eventually sent, that is to her sister, that is like, I don't want to talk to you again, and
like, you're mooching off of me here. I'll give you the money.
Exactly.
Like, it's so terrible. And even just like the way that the director and like the way the writing is, so that you don't know who to question or who to believe, like the little things, the details, like she's hanging a dress, she puts it on the rack, and then she goes and the dress is there again, and you're like, what is happening? And you realize that she had a drink because they were celebrating the Storm Reed's character getting into college, and so they're drinking, and it's like, oh, maybe she like drank, but we also know that she takes medication, so maybe the alcohol mixed with the drink and she's experiencing some sort of hallucination or vertigo, or she's dizzy, or she doesn't remember what she just did because she's a little tipsy. And that's a totally plausible thing. And then you just see other things like the stove getting like
that was obvious to me. That was just they made it so that to the audience, at least for me, they made it so obvious that he was doing these things, and yet it was there was nothing she could do about it.
Right.
And it set me up to, like, at every single moment, I was expecting the worst possible thing to happen to her.
Oh my gosh.
They were very good at making me care about Cecilia. And by the way, I also wanted to talk about the emotional roller coaster that was brought by Michael Dorman, the brother of Adrian, of his character arc in particular, of like kind of hating him and like knowing that he's the brother and that he's like a little bit like his brother, and also trying to support her while still going through the grief, and then going to supporting him because he's like, I understand, I was also controlled by my brother. And then ultimately what comes to the end, which, spoiler alert, he ends up helping his brother because he's still under the hand of his brother. I thought that relationship, even though he's certainly a side character, I would say, just really took a toll on my trust for anybody in the movie.
Right.
But
And he was an interesting component to the film because he's the one who is the mouthpiece for Adrian, like both like in a very literal sense, like he's still being controlled by him. I have my own thoughts about that because I do think people have free will, and I do think there is manipulation, but there is a part of him that obviously is sinister if he can carry out these tasks. But I just thought like the concept of introducing money into the equation like was a very interesting dynamic because it's like, okay, the whole crux of the story, Adrian is dead, abusive husband is dead, she's finally free, or so we believe, but we know she's not because the whole premise of the movie is being haunted by her ex. And then the whole concept is, okay, if she proves herself to not be insane and she's not ruled insane, then she gets to keep the $5 million, which is paid monthly in $100,000 increments for 4 years, which is another form of control.
Absolutely.
It's like financial control.
Yes.
Are you sane? Are you insane? Here's money. This money could like be a gateway to so many great opportunities and freedom in and of itself. And I remember thinking, just don't take the money. Just don't take it, because it's in some way you agreeing to any of this, you're still tied to him.
Yes.
Even if he's dead, you're still tied to him because it's his money.
Yes.
So there was a part of me that didn't like that aspect of it, but I was like, whatever, he's gone. If she wants to sign this, she wants to sign it.
I thought it was clever writing, but it
yeah.
also was dreadful.
Yeah, it was also dreadful, and I wonder how different things would have played out if anything would have changed if she didn't even want any involvement with the money at all.
But imagining being in her shoes in that situation, I can being offered that much money.
Right.
That's the unfortunate part about society is that I think I would take the money too, because like if something like that situation were to happen and you actually believed this person to be dead, even though it would be something that would be like, oh gosh, like there might be repercussions to this, $100,000 a month for the rest of your life,
right?
Not a bad deal.
Not a bad deal.
Unless he's still alive and is going to take advantage of the fact that you are getting $100,000 a month from him.
I feel like it could be viewed in two ways. It can be seen as reparations for all of the abuse. Like it's your due money, your due whatever. Or it can be seen as like this is still something that has control over you and it's linked to him. Like in my mind, like I wouldn't want dirty money from someone who I've been so hurt by. But like $5 million, oh my god.
And not to talk like a snake, but like if it was him not doing it consciously, if you just ended up getting the $100,000 without him consciously being like, you're gonna get $100,000, I would believe it more and I would take it more, because that would be like, oh, you didn't make the conscious decision to give this to me, I'm just getting this because of the way that this panned out, so I know there's no ill will behind it. But the fact that he did it consciously before he died, there was something behind it.
And there was also psychological manipulation in the letter from the very first line. Dear Cecilia, you left me. I never meant to hurt you. It's just like the constant theme of domestic violence and control by this narcissist who I can't even fathom or like wrap my head around the fact how someone can do this to another human being. Why someone would want to control somebody in this way, why someone would want to abuse someone. And it's something that's rampant in our society. Like domestic violence kills. And it's just not just men against women, it's women against men. It's you know, it's every sort of combination.
And on that topic, I did want to mention that I think something that this movie does really well is brings up very subtle points of domestic violence. It makes them extreme, but still gets the point across to an audience. If the goal of this movie was to kind of explain the idea of narcissism and explain the idea of abuse in the means of taking it to the most extreme so that people would actually understand it, I think this did a really good job, because this is informative in and of itself to show from even the minute details of the letter to showing that other people that are surrounding the narcissist or surrounding the person who is the abuser will ultimately take their side because they are also possibly being abused. It's just it's trying to show that a single person who is dealing out abuse is probably doing it tenfold throughout their lives. Now, as to how to deal with it, that's a different question. I would like to believe that there's some metaphor as to Elizabeth Moss slitting his throat, but I really haven't been able to wrap my head around the answer that the movie offered. Because right now, and I'm curious as to your opinion on this, it seems to me like the movie is saying there's not a very good, clean, or easy way to get out of a situation that involves domestic violence, that involves abuse. Like, even the most powerful in this situation, the most powerful person being the authorities, was undermined by the fact that Elizabeth Moss had to take it into her own hands. I mean, like, the general idea is like, oh, if you're dealing with domestic abuse, call the cops. Obviously, the cops aren't always able to help. There's a lot of situations where, like, unless they have, like, outright proof, they can't do anything actively.
Right.
But I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on what this movie offered as a solution.
I think, okay, definitely. That's a really good point. I think the way you figure out the solution is figuring out the cause. Like, so what is something that creates the atmosphere of domestic violence or domestic abuse? And, okay, power imbalance can be one of them. Like, this is a scientist who is extremely wealthy, who has socially isolated Cecilia from everybody who loves her and cares about her. We realize that her sister has no idea what has been going on in her life in terms of the abuse. It was
because
the
she's
first,
been cut off.
Yeah, she's been cut off. So if you really think about, like, the crux of abuse, the way to get out of it is by letting someone you trust know what's going on.
Yes.
And slowly finding a safe way to remove yourself from the abuser in a way where he can't come back for you. He or she can't come back for you. So what I loved, like, the reason why it doesn't work in this movie is because he's invisible.
Yeah, he
can
able
always
to
he can always be around her no matter what. And there's a quote in that movie that where he, like, tells her, no matter where you go, like, I will always be there. I'll always find you, and I'll leave a note or something, a trace to let you know that I was there.
God, so the pill bottle. Oh my God.
So the whole premise of the movie centers around, like, the invisibility aspect of it. And that's the most interesting thing, in my opinion, is that domestic violence is invisible. You don't always see physical scars of what's going on. A lot of it is mental. A lot of it is psychological. And so all these things are happening to Cecilia inside her mind, and to everybody else it seems like she's descending into madness because they don't see the signs of abuse. They don't see physical scars. They see someone who is acting in a way that they deem to be crazy, or they think, oh, is she not taking her medication, or what is going on? Because they don't see that, and it's all psychological, and only she can see it because it's internal, and that is the thing. That is the way you escape it, is by letting people know what's going on inside your head and talking to someone about it as well.
Thank you for giving me clarity on that, because honestly, I that's kind of the perspective that I was looking for, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And not to detract from such an emotional topic, but I do want to move towards possibly talking about the invisible suit, because I thought that was a really interesting point. But before we do that, I did want to make a point. Hello, chat. I'm here. I can see you. If you want to talk in the chat, guys, I am here to take your questions, your thoughts, anything that you want. We are here every Friday at 12 p.m. PST. If you guys want to talk about movies with us, if you guys want to hear us talk about movies, it's a changing forum every now and again, but please stop in if you're listening on podcasts, on Apple, on Spotify, anything that you listen to podcasts on. You guys can catch us on YouTube at The Popcorn Talk for Anatomy of a Movie every Friday. Please stop in. We would love to chat with you. We would love to talk more, and we would love to study the anatomy of some movies with you. Thank you very much. But yeah,
let's talk about the invisible suit.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool the way that they did it.
Didn't that look like a bunch of cameras on the
That's
suit?
exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Like the way that they made technology look like this, like just unbelievable shadow creature thing. Like I love this because in theory, like the original Invisible Man from the 1930s, the way that they did it was a potion. He just turned invisible from that, everything like that. But this was a way to modernize it to make it even somewhat believable. A few of my friends that I was with when I was watching the movie came out of it and they were like, that's a little like hoaxy. It wouldn't really work, blah, blah, blah. Like to an extent, I still believe that like they missed something by the fact that there would probably still be a shadow because it's a solid figure in a 3D space with light, you know.
Yeah.
But the fact that they did it in a somewhat believable way by making the suit AI respond to the everything around it, I thought it was so cool. The fantasy sci-fi nerd in me just like was absolutely on board for it. And I hope that everybody else felt the same way. How did you feel about the suit? Did you find it believable? Did you hate it?
I love that it was water resistant, but not white paint resistant. I love that it wasn't bullet resistant.
Yeah.
So we're not going into like Marvel territory here. It wasn't bulletproof, but it was water resistant, and it was like obviously white paint is the way to figure out where the person is, and
that
sometimes
scene,
a bullet.
Oh
sometimes.
My God. Yeah, but the bullet made the technology. I believe the water resistance only because it's like, okay, the glass over the camera is blah, blah, blah. The white paint left marks. The one thing, apparently the original 1930 did this. By the way, disclaimer, I have not seen the original 1930. Mina, you have also not?
I have not seen it.
There is a scene in it that I was told by one of my friends who I watched it with where the Invisible Man is walking out in the rain and you can see his silhouette in the rain, and that's kind of how somebody sees him. And I don't know all of the details, but there was the scene where they were outside of the hospital and it was all in the rain, and I really wanted that to be an aspect of it, but almost the fact that they subverted that and did not do that was cool. It was an interesting choice. I think they probably thought about it in the writing and were like, no, that's too easy, which feels like what a lot of this film did. They didn't take a lot of the easy routes to get to cheap like reveals. Like I did you feel as though anything in this movie was cheap? Did you feel as though any of the was there any moment in this that you feel as though they did not earn?
Not really. I mean, I feel like I can think of all the moments that were so well done, like the dog barking because the dog can sense a presence, because the dog doesn't need to see it, has a sense of smell, and it knows when there's another human body there. Especially
his master.
And seeing the fog. How would you see the fog of his mouth if the whole face is covered, though? That was the part that I didn't understand. Well, how would you see his breath?
Well, it might be like, you know those like green morph suits? You know what I'm talking about? Like it might just be, there might be like that kind of thing where he can breathe and stuff like that. That's my thought on that. But I understand what you're saying, like especially since it was one breath, but like
and no footprints, like you know, everything was like very immaculate. And I guess that it makes sense. Like at the scene of a crime, like, you know, people wear all sorts of things to be able to cover their tracks. I thought it was interesting. There was a point in time when I wondered like how many suits are there, and then there's like a twist at the end that we'll get into later. But I do want to quickly talk about some of the other characters, including Harriet Dyer, the sister, Harriet Dyer, the actress who plays Emily Cass, the sister. Yes. We also have Aldous Hodge, who plays James Lanier, and Storm Reed.
Aldous Hodge and Storm Reed, so good. Yeah. Such good characters.
They were a huge part of the movie, and I think it added a really interesting element to the movie. The sister especially, I kept wondering in the beginning, what is her relationship to this man? Is that her boyfriend, or is this guy just a friend and he has a daughter? Like, what is the relationship there?
Are you talking about Harriet Dyer, Emily
Emily Cass,
her relationship? I honestly, I don't know if I need an answer to that personally. It just felt like the relationship that they were trying to establish without telling us was showing that there was a relationship here. They all knew each other in some way. And therefore they were willing to do that. Like maybe it was the case that she was once with him, maybe. But they also didn't explain a lot of his backstory. Like I'm really, to an extent, happy that they didn't go like, oh, well, my dead wife or something like that, because the wife wasn't present and it was just him and his daughter. Like I personally didn't feel as though I needed an explanation for a lot of that relationship. They did a good job doing without telling. Did you feel the same way, or did you feel as though you needed a little more based off of the relationship?
In the beginning, I felt like I needed a little bit more, just because I remember I kept thinking, okay, so is Emily Cass's boyfriend James Lanier, and is that her stepdaughter? Like, what's going on? Or is that her daughter? And I just wanted to know what the relationship was. And when I saw that her sister wasn't like with the guy, then I was like, wait, so that's not her boyfriend? Because I kept thinking like the reason she wasn't in the same house was because the sister's like, you can't be here, he'll find you. I didn't realize like they're all living together. I was super confused by that bit, and I felt like it altered the story for me a little bit, is not knowing the exact relationship of who this James character was in relationship to both sisters.
But to be fair, I think that it did display that that Elizabeth Moss's character like was staying at Storm and I'll just say James and Sydney's house. Sorry, I keep switching between the names. because one, he was a cop, she probably felt protected. Two, she wasn't with her sister, and Elizabeth's character, Cecilia knew that gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to go between. Yeah. Cecilia's sister knew that Cecilia knew that Adrian would know where her sister was.
Right.
And
so they had to be with like a person who wasn't known.
No
really.
Affiliation, and maybe they used to have affiliation, and that it was so disconnected that before the relationship,
right?
Like Cecilia didn't tell Adrian about anything that happened between the two of them, but it just I really enjoyed the performances that they had, because I felt like I didn't really need to question the relationship for me to get into it, because it was obvious to me that they all cared about each other, that this was a thing that was a favor for Cecilia and for her sister. It was something that was a burden on on James.
James, yeah.
But it was not something that he wasn't willing to do because he cared about either the sister or for Cecilia so much. But also I just want to say, gosh, James and Sydney throughout the entire thing were some of my favorite characters.
They were great.
And anything that happened to them throughout the entire movie, I was just reeling. To talk about the violence for a second, something that actually had me a little cringing during the movie was the scene where James is being held up by Adrian, or whoever was in the suit at the time, either Adrian or his brother. Yeah. And we just watch him getting the absolute crap beaten out of him.
Yeah.
And like after already watching Cecilia kind of get thrown around, like I was a little bit weird. It was just like very visceral, and I could tell that they were doing it for that reason. I think if any part was cheap for me, it was that part. I did not need to see Aldous Hodge get beaten half to death in front of my eyes from the perspective of Adrian.
I think the reason it was so important is because he wanted to hurt Cecilia in whatever way possible. And when I say he, I mean Adrian. Yeah. And, complicit with Adrian is Tom Griffin, played by Michael Dorman, who is Adrian's brother. Yeah. And we find out that there are two suits, and that's the second one. And, that it felt like Scooby-Doo when she unmasks him. And it's like, wow, this person that you semi-trusted, that you thought wasn't doing this, that was also a victim, is the perpetrator of this crime. Yeah. Like, kind of showing you that the people closest to you that are unexpected are the ones who can hurt you the most.
Yes.
And just the betrayal in that, in that alone. But we already knew he was a shitty character because of the previous interaction she had with him, where he's like, just keep the baby, and he seemed to know about it.
Gosh, that scene just, I was really hoping that he wouldn't turn out being that way, but the fact that he did, one, well written, two, I was just like, oh, I'm so mad. Why can't anybody be cool for her?
That adds another sexual assault layer to the entire thing, because it means that she was raped by the Invisible Man. And that's like something that I don't think people are talking about right now, is that rape was involved.
Yeah. They at very least alluded to it in that like one scene, talking about how she had a baby.
Right.
Do you think that
it's such a violation in so many ways.
Absolutely,
there's a violation of privacy with the emails. There's a violation of trust, and then there's a violation of something sacred like that, where she's sexually violated and raped.
What I was going to ask was, do you think that happened with the invisible suit, or do you think that happened before anything with the suit happened? Do you think that happened while she was still in the house with him? Maybe we're just arguing over a semantic that doesn't really matter.
I think it definitely had to have happened with the invisible suit, because it seems like she had no recollection of ever having sex with him, right? Because there was a period of time that he was dead. And then the fact that she was dumbfounded by it, I really do think that it happened after, but one could argue that it happened while she was still with him, because he knew she was taking birth control. She thought that she was smart enough to hide it from him, but he was replacing the birth control tablets with something else because he wanted to get her pregnant. Also, so you could argue either way.
Side note, just in the chat, Diamond Rattler, thank you for joining us. Diamond Rattler says, Adrian was never in the suit. It was his brother. I actually think that there was a point in that movie where they made you want to question that. I think Adrian definitely was in the suit. I think that was the point of the ending, finding him in the locked basement. He realized that he was going to get caught, so he made his brother get into the suit and do it. I don't think it was his brother the entire time. I think it was Adrian at some points, and I think that it was also what was his name, the brother? I think it was Tom. Some other times.
Yeah.
I think most of it was Adrian, and then.
What about in the hospital though? The one who
hospital,
killed all of them.
I think that was a combination of the two of them. The group that I was with was arguing about this. Not arguing, but having a discussion about this at the end. We think that there was a possibility that there was a handoff involved, where there was the car that was there. It wasn't just a one-man operation. We think it was both Tom and Adrian coming to the same place. Tom went in, swapped the suit to Adrian, kind of thing. But I think that was the point of the writers. That's what the writers were trying to do, were to get us to not know whether it was Tom and Adrian by the reveal of that. And I don't think there's a definite. I don't think there's a definite. Tom was here, Adrian was here. Tom was in this scene, Adrian was in this scene.
Right.
And I like it better that way. I like better personally not knowing when and where each of them was, because then we don't know how involved either of them were. We're supposed to be questioning at the end, but I personally don't think there's any question that Adrian was in that suit 100%. Doing what he was doing at some point.
100%. And even if he wasn't in the suit, he's still the one who created the suit and carried out this plan. I mean, he's the one with the ulterior motive. Why would what motive would his brother have to torture this girl? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Though there's probably conversations going on where it's saying, like, in the end, was it true that Adrian actually was kidnapped, actually did not do all of this?
Of course.
Which obviously the writers did.
Yeah.
And thank you for doing such a good job writing this. I think I almost don't want to deliberate on it too much, because part of me still wants to believe that Elizabeth Moss's character, Cecilia, was in the right for understanding that this was something only her abuser could do. But, like, even if, for instance, he was staying at home, wasn't in the invisible suit the entire time, and it was Tom, it wasn't Tom. It was Adrian telling Tom, do this. It was some sort of relationship where Tom found that for his brother, one way or another, this was going to happen. And I think that Adrian is made smart enough to be like, hey, you're going to do this for me because look at all these things that she's doing to me. And so I don't get caught. You do this the whole time.
Right.
So even if it was Tom in the suit the whole time, which
I think it wasn't. Sorry to chime in.
Absolutely.
I at one point I thought that. But I think the prime example to show how at least both of them were in it was there's one scene the first time that that Elizabeth Moss character goes back to the house. She abandons, like, she gets in the car. And there's someone in the invisible suit in the house. So she called the lift, and they were like, lift.
That was my favorite. That was my favorite scene, because I was like, only a Lyft driver would wait that long. An Uber driver would have been like, see you later, I gotta go. Surge pricing is going on right now. See ya. And I love that it was Lyft.
But she drives to the place. She drives to the other house, and there's someone already in there. So, I mean, you could theorize maybe, like, he hung on the back of the car, maybe something. But I think that means, like, hey, there were two suits. And
absolutely.
And they make that very clear that there were two.
The fact that there were two suits in the first place, I think Ryan brings up a very good point.
Maybe even three, because she hid one of them. There's a possibility that there were three.
Yeah, absolutely. There could have been multiple. I mean, the point was he was an optics expert. He knew how to make these suits. If there was one, if there was two, there could be three. And you're not supposed to know the answer to that. And I really appreciate that about this story. I know we talked a little bit beforehand, and there were some parts that weren't very believable for you, or answers that you didn't get.
And we'll get into that.
Absolutely. And
also he says surprise.
Yes, that's right. That was his voice. That's correct. That was Adrian. But I do think that the fact that they did not give us all the answers, like in any film, sometimes, especially with fantastical films, with sci-fi films, getting answers often is worse than not getting answers.
But also, you know, and I agree with that, but also Adrian's phone was at the very top of the attic. And, like, there were all these other clues that it was Adrian's presence.
Absolutely.
And we know that. But I want to ask you about the very, very end when she finally gets, and Elizabeth Moss's character, after going through the loss of her sister and being framed for it, which was a pivotal moment in the movie.
Oh my God, that scene.
Where you think, like, oh, she's going to be in a public space. It's going to be safe.
Oh my God.
There's no way Adrian can torment her now in front of all these people. And she finally tells her sister, and we finally feel her sister starting to believe her story. And then the Invisible Man lifts up the knife, slits the rope.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. That was so unnecessary.
Oh, God.
Slits the throat
That scene
of the sister. And then Elizabeth Moss's character gets framed for it. Cecilia is holding the knife. Everyone in the restaurant starts running out and freaking out, and the screaming lady in the restaurant is just like
that
losing
scene
it.
Was the most terrifying and satisfying scene. It was satisfying in a bad way. I mean, satisfying in the way that you know that was a moment that all of this has led up to.
Yeah.
That, like, I mean, besides the ending, which I feel was definitely earned, it's just going back to the idea of earned moments. I think that this moment was something that nobody saw coming, but I felt as soon as that happened, I was like, oh my God, of course. Like, why would he stop? He doesn't need to.
Yeah.
He's got a suit that makes it so that he could do anything. And
I never thought it would go to that point of him actually murdering.
Yeah.
I never thought it would get to that point, but he wants to kill all the people around her and socially isolate her and get his vengeance for her leaving him.
Real quick side note to Diamond Rattler, I would not to kind of be mean about it, I would go back and watch the film. The suit that Tom was in got shot, broke, they pulled it off. Cecilia had the other suit to be able to kill Adrian with. So there were 2 suits confirmed.
It was hidden.
It was the one that she hid in the vents, and then there was another one that was being used by Tom in the hospital, where not the hospital. Where did he eventually die?
At the house.
Yeah, at the house. Yeah,
yeah.
it was eventually. We saw the suit was broken. He was dead. And she
yeah.
doesn't know optics, so she couldn't have built another one. There was 2.
What do we think about the ending where she goes into the house with Tom? With Adrian. He sets up this beautiful dinner for her. It's like very creepy and unsettling. And then we see that we know that she's wired.
Yeah.
We know that she's wired. What did you think about how that entire scene played out from the very beginning of the tenseness of that conversation to her going to the bathroom? Did you think that he was going to do something crazy? Did you ever believe that he was innocent in any capacity? And then when you saw the very end, like, we'll get to that one later too, but like, what were your thoughts leading up to that crazy scene at the end?
Shout outs to Oliver Jackson, who played Adrian. You knew how to portray somebody that was vacant behind the eyes. His performance, immediately as soon as I saw him, that feeling of dread arrived. I never believed anything good about his character. Everything that led up to this so far, he had this front of being formal, of being like wanting this, of wanting to be kind, but there was just something about the way that he portrayed his performance, something about the way that he stood, all of the intricate movements, everything that was set up. It just showed how controlling he was. It showed he wanted to bring her to the house. He knows how she feels about the house. He knows how she feels about the territory. And I thought the performance of that character, even though he was only in 5 minutes of it, like technically he was only on screen for like 10 total minutes.
Right.
I thought that the payoff of her killing him was great. And I thought he was showing his controlling aspects, even through being nice the entire time. The
gaslighting.
Yeah, absolutely. All the minute details of him being like, oh, this is a nice place. You can be safe here, while knowing exactly what he did, how he did it, and what was going on.
Right.
Like, all of that combined, just, I bought it. And, like, I really was never on his side. I think that some people could be. I think that that's the intricacy in this performance, is that it shows a man who, besides all of the abuse, could be seen as somebody who is a good person, who could be seen as somebody who on the surface level is believable to being empathetic. But at the end of the day, he was controlling that entire situation. He brought her into his den in order to do, and offered her things, sweet nothings that meant absolutely nothing. And she knew it. And that final scene felt very satisfying to me.
I love that she used the same thing that traumatized her, where, he slit his sister's, he slit her sister's throat.
Yeah.
And she used that same exact device as a way to empower herself and free herself from what had happened.
God, the same
and
exact
use the same
knife.
Violence.
With the suit too.
Yeah. I thought that was insane. I do want to very quickly go over some plot holes that I noticed and get your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Just to clear something up.
Yeah.
The director actually did confirm Tom was only the decoy in the one scene.
Gotcha. Thank you very
the
much.
Hospital and home at the end. Right.
Thank you very much. Yes. That.
Tom was in the hospital for sure.
Yeah, because he got in the car and drove to the house.
Yeah.
Okay, I kept wondering if Adrian was the one in the hospital and then he escaped, and then Tom was coming from a different direction into the house.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I think that's possible too.
Yeah, because I thought there was a possibility of either one, and they left it open to interpretation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryan. But in terms of plot holes and questions, literally, this was driving me crazy. How did nobody check up on the dog, especially when Elizabeth Moss was like, my dog, I'm going to come back for you. Like, don't worry, I'm not going to leave you. And then she knows Adrian is dead. Does no one say, hey, where the hell is this dog?
Okay, I thought about it this way, actually. I don't think it was a plot hole. I think she was like, look, go free. I can't take care of you. If I take you, he'll be able to find me. You'll be astray for a little bit, but somebody will eventually find this dog because they were close to the city.
Yeah.
I think that she didn't have the time to think about it, but did have the time to think about, I don't want this dog to be with Adrian, because I think it was obvious that Adrian abused the dog as well.
Was it? Because of the collar?
Not only the collar, but the dog was very scared and timid around him the whole time. Never wanted to go down into the basement. When she went down into the basement originally, the dog was like sitting up at the stairs, all very scared.
I never picked up on that. That's such a good point. I kept thinking that he was loyal to both owners.
I think he was loyal. I mean, a dog is the ultimate showcasing of its owner.
Yeah.
The dog was scared but loyal, because a dog will never question its loyalty. I mean, Adrian is all the dog ever knew.
Yeah.
But to an extent, it also knew the limitations that it had with Adrian. It had to be loyal, but also was very terrified of Adrian, because Adrian was probably physically abusive, or in ways like needed the dog to be in line with him. It doesn't surprise me that Adrian had a dog that only he could kind of reel in.
Right.
And
I guess I'm just curious, like, the minute she found out, like, he died in quotation marks 2 weeks after she left. Like, wouldn't she be like, let's find the dog? And then if the dog was there, it would always bark whenever there was like another presence. But anyway, plot hole number 2, are paint and bullets the only thing that can indicate his presence?
I think the paint was just an aspect to show that something like that was colored could be on the surface of him, like material can stick to the suit, because he was a solid object. If you throw paint on it, like, it'll be there. Bullets, you just shot through the suit. If you put a hole in something, it's probably going to be effective.
That's true.
I can imagine that, like, with the cameras being on the suit, it's like if you destroy one or if you destroy an area, the, like, whole conglomeration of the suit is, like, not able to hold up as well. Like, I don't know how the suit was made, but, like, from what I understand about electronics, if you punch a hole through a computer, it's probably not going to be able to work all the way.
Right. That's why I thought water would be, like, a terrible thing for, like, a camera. But there are waterproof cameras. So
and I also imagine if this is optics for the military, it was probably something along the lines of, we need a suit that is waterproof so we can do all of these missions and be able to do this. I imagine he worked for the military, because that's the only reason you would have use for an invisible suit. Why else would you use it?
Okay, and I have two left. I just thought of one right now. There was no death certificate or anyone, like, when a body dies.
Yeah.
It goes through a process of being declared, like, by the state. There's a death certificate. There's a whole process. You're not just like, oh, here's ashes in an urn. Like, that would indicate to me that the brother was guilty the whole time, because there's no death certificate. I'd be like, if I was so traumatized by something, I'd be like, where the hell's the death certificate?
I'm not gonna lie, I've never thought about a death certificate in my life. I did not like, that is a plot point that, like, if they brought up, like, oh, here's his death certificate, I think that would have been less believable than the urn, and the urn wasn't believable at all, because that's just a document you could just forge. Like, he was able to get able to get a newspaper story about it, and somebody to get him ashes in an urn.
Right.
Like, I don't.
Fake news. This is the fake news media that we live in. This is it. This is like why there are celebrity death hoaxes all the time, because people aren't fact checking. Okay, my final one, and this was a huge plot hole, you guys. Like, this is the one where I'm like, if you just looked at the damn security cameras, problem solved, nothing would happen. So there's this scene in the insane asylum where everyone's getting, like, murdered by the invisible men. They're getting dragged, like, crazy shit's happening, excuse my language. And Cecilia runs out to the entrance, and there's all these security guards, and behind the security guards you see a room filled with monitors. How do they not see this happening?
This is, I think this actually says something for the movie that I thought was really important. The idea of immediate action not being able to get all the context. Because, like, for instance, she was in that area, like, a scene that alluded to this scene and what would happen in it was with the daughter, was with Sydney and James, when Adrian it was Adrian at this point, punches Sydney, like she thinks it's Cecilia.
But Cecilia's hand never moves.
But there's nobody else in the room.
Yeah.
So her logic, the reason that she was like, the only person that could do this is Cecilia, she doesn't know that Adrian's there. She has no idea that the invisible suit is a thing. So the only idea in Sydney's brain is, oh my God, Cecilia just punched me. That's probably exactly what happened at the hospital, because it was the aspect of the people that were there that got killed knew that there was something happening that they couldn't see that was killing them. But the guards that were coming outside, they were just like, there's a woman with a gun and a bunch of dead bodies, and she's the only person here. Like, I actually thought in that scene at the hospital when she's outside and has the gun, I really thought that she was going to get shot by a security guard, because she, as far as they know, opened fire.
Right.
Like, if you go into it, you cannot, like, check a monitor and be like, hey, what the heck is happening here? Check the monitor and then go. Like, this was an active shooting situation.
Right.
They didn't have time to look at that. So I understand why that might have come off as a plot hole, but I actually think that was a very clever device to show that Cecilia was, again, not in control of this situation, and immediate action needed to be taken. And she was able to get away with it because she was giving such immediate action.
Right.
Like, if those guards with the rifles saw her, she would have been dead.
Yeah, I mean, they would have, but if they looked at the monitors, they would have seen bodies being dragged, and they would have seen that she was in one area.
Yeah.
The gun wasn't pointed towards them, and all this stuff was happening. Like,
my only answer to that is
just bad security guards.
If you and I, without seeing this movie, like, saw what happened there.
Yeah, we would just draw conclusions.
My first idea would not be, oh, there's a man in an invisible suit murdering everybody. I don't think that would be the conclusion that I, as a security guard at a mental hospital, seeing a woman run around with a gun would make.
I totally get that. I know what you were telling me behind the scenes, and we do have to wrap up really soon, but what you were telling me behind the scenes was that the plot holes weren't enough for you to... to not be in the movie. Like, we were both still very much into the movie. Yeah. I just noticed all these plot holes, and I was like, come on now.
Yeah.
But yeah, very quickly, in terms of audience reception, on Rotten Tomatoes, on the tomato meter, which is scored by critics, The Invisible Man got 91%.
Thank goodness.
Audience score 88%, a little lower, a little surprising.
Still really high, though.
Still very high.
I mean, Blumhouse, man, they're...
Still very high. And in terms of budget, this was an under $10 million budget.
Yes,
and you have the stats.
So just to give the stats for a minute, Blumhouse produced this. It was $7 million to $9 million estimated budget. I don't know if that does include advertising or not. I don't think it does, but it doesn't really matter regardless. Opening weekend, they made $28 million. They've made $35 million gross in the United States.
Crazy.
And they made $55 million worldwide with this. Ladies and gentlemen, that is approximately $35 to $40 million of profit. Blumhouse does it again. I really think, one, good job. Thank you for making and supporting these films like this. Two, thank you for supporting smart production, because I think the fact that they are taking these movies that are not costing $80 million, $90 million and only making $30 million back. Like, I've seen a pattern recently where a lot of movies, at very least an opening weekend, will make no more than $30 million. Blumhouse has found a way to make it profitable every single time. And I just am so happy and hope to continue to see these kind of productions go through, whether through Blumhouse or through somebody else. I really think that this is just a way that works, and it's putting out really good movies.
And it's a smart business model. And also, like, something I noticed is you don't have to go for an A-list celebrity. You can cut down on cost, get an actress who is phenomenal at what she does, Kate Moss, like, holler at
Elizabeth
you.
Moss, thank you.
Elizabeth Moss.
I've wanted to do the same thing. It's okay.
I keep thinking Kate Moss, but I know Elizabeth Moss. I mean, she's in Handmaid's Tale, Mad Men. Like, she's no stranger to the screen, but this is her first lead role in a blockbuster movie.
I can't wait to see her in many more.
I think this is going to be the start of something really great for Elizabeth.
Do you see anything for award season?
You know what? I've been thinking about this. I know with Lupita Nyong'o, she did an incredible job as the lead in Us. Amazing. No, and I know that Florence Pugh got a lot of buzz surrounding Midsommar. Yeah. I don't know how this is going to hold up compared to those two.
Understandable.
But I hope that Elizabeth, gets like her due accolades and like gets cast in more of these roles.
Elizabeth, people are seeing the amount of subtlety that you are putting in your performance. I think that you deserve as many awards as you can get for this. For people who have been in situations with domestic violence, with people that have been in situations like this was I can only imagine how difficult this role was to portray, even as well as she did.
It was amazing.
The just minute details that she put into every piece of her body language, every movement that she made, every delivery of her lines, the writing was very good, but she made it better.
She definitely did.
I know that she probably had a lot of practice doing it with Handmaid's Tale, because Handmaid's Tale is a very similar role, but I think that this was handled so incredibly well. I really want to see her get accolades for it, because I was convinced the whole time. If her performance was even a little bit off, the whole movie would have been much less believable.
Yeah.
But
there were waves of it. Like, there was the wave where she had her breakdown and she was in the insane asylum and she's screaming, like, he's invisible, he did it. Like, that in and of itself is like that Oscar-worthy performance you're looking for.
And then the scene going out to the mailbox.
And then the subtlety of, like, the beginning. Yeah, everything was so great. And the sound mixing, the sound was so great. I do want to talk about legacy very quickly before we wrap this up. What do we think people will be saying about this movie in decades to come? Do you think it's going to be forgotten and lost in the mix, or do you think people are going to be talking about this for a while?
I unfortunately think, just because of the kind of way that movies are right now, it probably will get lost in the mix a little bit, but I think maybe years down the road, people will look back at it and be like, this is really cool. I think we're just kind of, as like moviegoers, we kind of are always on like, that's great, on to the next thing. And especially with Blumhouse producing as many movies as they are, and a lot of movies like this going, I think this, to the general public eye, obviously a good amount of people turned out, but it wasn't as much as, for instance, Sonic the Hedgehog. It wasn't as much as like big blockbuster movies. This is, at the end of the day, a like more indie based. It's not indie, but it's indie based thriller.
Right.
And I think, like a lot of the thrillers that come out of the like 70s and 80s, this will be looked at in 20 years and be like, oh my God, this was so good. But unfortunately right now, I don't think that a lot of people in a year are going to look back and be like, unlike Us or unlike Get Out, I don't think they're going to look back and be like, oh my God, that movie was so incredible.
I don't think it's as crazy as a concept as those other two movies, and that's the only reason I do agree with you. Like, it's a good movie, but conceptually it's not as weird or unique as the other two premises. I do think, however, that Elizabeth Moss is going to be remembered in this role.
100%.
But I don't think the movie as a whole is going to be remembered in the same way as Elizabeth Moss will be for her portrayal in this role.
I think people will come back to this movie for Elizabeth Moss and then be like, oh my God, this is an interesting movie.
Right.
I think you're right.
And go see it?
Yeah, go see it, please. Please. Honestly, I really think it's worth a watch. I haven't seen a lot of thrillers, but on the line of thrillers that I've watched, this kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. It was dreadful, but in a good way. It was so interesting, intriguing to watch. The performances were incredible. The cast was really well done. Please go see it.
Yeah, I 100% echo that sentiment, you guys. I definitely recommend seeing this movie, and this is coming from someone who is not a horror person at all. I do love this on a psychological level. I love what it has to say about domestic violence, and I love the crazy twists and turns that we see in the movie. Highly recommend it, and thank you so much for tuning in.
Can't wait to see more from Leigh Whannell.
This week's Anatomy of a Movie at Popcorn Talk, and thank you so much to Ryan in the booth, our producer, for chiming in with amazing sound effects, commentary. We love you, Ryan. And Vito, it has been such a pleasure.
It's been so great talking with you.
I hope this isn't my last time talking to you,
because I love chatting with you. I hope to be able to do this again with you as well. Yeah.
Where can everybody find you on social media?
If you're
If
you're interested in finding me on social media, you can find me anywhere at VScutti. That's at VSCUTTI, mostly on Twitter and Instagram.
And I'm your host, Mina Naidine. You can follow me on Instagram, on Twitter, and most importantly on TikTok at Mina Makes Magic. I'll see you there.
Thank you guys so much.
Bye, everybody.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.